Plus, I think it makes me look smarter.
Hey, I went ahead and went live. Just so.
JD was just there.
I got one lens in for a week because I scratched this eye. I thought it was a lens, but it's the eye. We switched them, it still hurt.
You got something in your eye?
I do a lot of yard work in thorns.
I ripped a piece of metal one time. It got on my eye. That's tough.
Yeah.
If you will look at these and just circulate them around.
Yep.
Not for this one, but I do council packets today for the Tuesday council meeting. So I'm just gonna put that in the council packet to give to all the sure review. But I did receive that. What's the lady's name? Sitting in line. Okay, that's where the pictures came from. Just so y'all know.
Okay.
Hey, Don, how are you?
How are you today?
Doing well.
How you doing, buddy? How you doing?
The cat was on.
You see that last language? You see that last language I added after parks?
Yeah, Deanne was gonna reach out to you.
We're at 1,500 across the board, right?
Yeah, on square footage.
Yeah, because when I came in, that was the topic of the discussion. You know, versus 14 and 18 and 22.
Lady should be in just a few minutes.
Ryan, you get a land or not?
I'm not doing it 2 times.
Yeah, you are.
I think you can handle it. You had the most experience.
No, sir. That doesn't mean anything.
I like that.
I'm a 12-year rookie, okay?
Ryan did a good job, doesn't he?
I thought he did an excellent job.
And if we can go ahead and get everyone to silence their cell phones. Thank you. Thank you.
JD's on his way.
We can delinquent some duties. Where's the community shopping center? My wife was cleaning out. How have you been? So you kind of put 3 horses in?
What I think I'm gonna do, since I don't graduate till summer, I think I'm gonna send them
When's the last day
to a
for
trainer for a
baseball?
refresher
Dave?
for 30
I was gonna ask you
days.
about
Finish
that.
the fence up at the farm and then just move them.
You need a
directly
coach,
over.
I'm gonna use you. They're gonna make that, you know.
Did you find a good trainer?
Really?
I cannot think of any. I thought,
Pike
I
County?
can't think of any in this immediate area.
No, I mean, is everybody.
Ralph Bass at one time was, but he's
What can we do,
over.
Jim?
Right, I know a few, but they're pretty spread out. So, you know, we're talking
Yes.
like
No,
Sonoya.
Even for coach
Mike
pitch?
Haslett is a local vet, he's been in Pete Park Haslett, okay, he's been, this is veteran officer.
Okay.
His door
I had a lot of kids that played coach people last year that didn't come back and play.
That's from my old man.
Got 22, 23 kids.
Gotcha.
Call Mud.
Yeah, what's her name?
Good, how are you? I think when they were.
And they used to have a team that
Jim?
She comes to people's house when they dogs from the cat.
Oh, perfect.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order, and I'll turn it over to Russell and kind of head out, but
So the purpose of today's public hearing is to entertain questions and concerns from the general public regarding the proposed zoning ordinance. We have with us Mr. Bill Johnson, who's been working on providing a draft and making updates for the council. So Mayor, if it pleases the council, we just ask for you to invite the public to come forward.
all right. So if you would like to speak, we ask you just to come up here to one of the X's and they need to sign in. If they haven't signed in, just speak. So.
And state your name and address. Yeah, you can go ahead and come forward.
All right. Yes, I've got a couple of questions, a couple of comments. Things that I heard on the news this week kind of concerned me as far as dealing with agriculture. And if you look out 10 years down the road, if y'all move city limits and take in a farm, or y'all gonna say that person cannot sell that farm and it stays in livestock production? Or are they gonna have to go pick up manure out of pasture? If you look at proper livestock production, manure is dropped on the ground and the nutrients are recycled. And farmland that is in Cuba, which is signed up for tax breaks, it has to be kept in agriculture. The land that fits in that, I don't know that you can stick rules on. There are laws that say we have the right to farm, and I think y'all need to be very careful on how y'all make some of these rules. The other thing to me, and JD, man, you talk a lot about house next door. Why do we need more rules when y'all cannot enforce the rules that you have? The man is still in that house. He shows up at 9:15 every night in a cab and is gone before anybody can come in and catch him. Now, why y'all can't put a lock on that house where he can't get in is beyond me. And I would trade cow patties right next to my house and give you that house and let you have it and look at it. I get tired of being woke up. I get tired of putting up with the grass this tall in the summer. So if y'all aren't going to enforce the rules that you got, why add more rules?
So what are the specifics on the property where you're having issues?
312 Magnolia. You've been told about it.
Called him several times.
And what's the circumstances?
Y'all
Except for
y'all pulled the power base on it. They're living in that house
With no
with
power.
no level of occupancy. City code guys come by, he says he can't go in the house. But they're staying there, they show up about 9:15 every night in a taxi. So if y'all can't handle that, why do you want to take on more? The other question I have is why can y'all not make the utility companies, telephone, and cable companies cut their poles down when and quit leaving snags all around this town?
Check on that.
And then my other thing is the farmer's market last summer. Folks at the depot paid $250 one license fee. Folks that sat where farmer's market had been, they each paid $250 a piece. It should have been the same price for everybody. There is a different set of rules depending on where it's at. And it's not right producers that are producing, they each have to pay, but one other place, anybody can go up there for $250. It should have been uniform. And y'all owe some money back for that.
So you're talking about the difference between a privately owned structure and government land. So your argument is that on government land, it should be the same price as it is on private property?
It should be the same for all producers. And y'all are a sponsor on that farmer's market.
So if you have 2 or 3 different private entities that are leasing space for produce, and one's $10 and one's $20 and one's $200, what should we charge?
Why did y'all charge one license for $250 on the farmer's market at the depot, and for the farmer's market had always been, you charge $250 per person? Why didn't you charge $250 per person there at the depot?
So the difference was, in the thought process, was the depot's private property. The city doesn't own that, nor do we control that.
Then why has the farmer's market been where it's been for so many years?
Private individual purchased the property and decided he.
No, I'm talking about why has it been up there, the city market, why had it been up there for years? And we paid a licensing fee every year. And then y'all went to sticking one fee per individual. It should have been one fee. Y'all are a joint sponsor on that.
So the thought behind that was, in Thomaston, you have certain transient vendors. Whether I'm selling palm trees, or I'm selling pocketbooks, or I'm selling barbecue on the weekends, or I'm selling fireworks. So the thought was to provide some cohesion between each individual transient vendor. The problem with the farmer's market is that that's a public space, right? So if the council wants to charge $10 per vendor, that's fine. But how do you arbitrarily charge one vendor a different price than another vendor if they're setting up? And that was some of the thought. What they charge, the body, they can set that fee at whatever they want. If they want to be $10,
But why was your licensing fee $250 a producer there under the trees? Not
because that was the transient vendor fee that was adopted, which was applied across the board, whether you're selling palm trees, watermelons, barbecue, fireworks, etc. So your argument would be farmers should pay a reduced fee.
It should have been one fee. And y'all were a joint sponsor on that.
Well, it's city property, right? I mean, we don't necessarily sponsor it, we just kind of regulate.
No, y'all sponsored it. Y'all were in on it when we started it.
When was that?
2003.
2000.
It's been on the courthouse square. It's been at United Bank. It's been on the parking lot, and then was moved under the trees.
So the thought is to build another one, right? The farmer's market, we have plans to build that, and then whatever the body wants to charge people to come and set up, we would invite you to participate in that conversation. I'm just trying to illustrate to you now why there was a fee charged, because it was supposed to be symmetry between transient vendors, irregardless of the practice or what they were selling.
Well, it should have been the same between the depot and up there.
Again, private venture, public land. Would you want me coming to tell you what you can sell your cattle for?
You can come do it if you want.
Would you like that?
We sell for what we can get.
But would you like it to be mandated by the government?
There are a lot of mandates to us by the government. So I deal with the government every day with the farm. So you're not telling me anything new. I have to jump through hoops with the government every day.
My point is, I can't tell Walmart what they can charge. I can't tell Ingles what they can charge. It's a private venture versus public
But you
land.
should have charged the same that downtown market that was in the trees should have been figured one market, and you charged one fee for the vendors that came up there.
How do you know? How do I know if I have 10 vendors versus 100?
Y'all used to send folks by to pick up money.
But if we're trying to match a price and equal 250, that's going to be divisible by the amount of participation you have, which could fluctuate week to week. And what you paid, so we
You
try to.
have a downtown farmer's market with a checking account that David Newman come up here and bought a license each year. All you had to do was do the same thing y'all been doing.
So who gets to decide who holds the license for a market on public
Yes, sir.
property?
It is listed as a downtown farmer's market. That's the way y'all have always done it.
Okay.
That thing has had a license since probably 2007 as a downtown farmer's market. When I was in the extension office, I came and bought it.
So if we're, my point, if we're going to lease public property, right, for a downtown farmer's market, and you come and you pull that permit and it's $250 that covers everybody that
Right.
you want to allow, and now Bill and Dave and Mark all come to the city and they want that same spot because they don't like you. How do we decide who gets the license for that spot? That's why we decided to charge each individual participant for whatever they were selling.
Then why was it listed under the downtown farmer's market for years and bought one license?
Who gets to buy the license?
The market itself buys the license.
Who is the market?
All the folks that go up there and sell. They pay in each time they go, and then that money is used to buy the license. That's the way it's always been.
So who controls that? Is it a LLC? Is it a nonprofit? Is it just a random person?
David Newman controlled it after I got out of the extension office.
So then you're providing some level of exclusivity to a
No,
private
you're not.
individual
Anybody
to
that
manage
walks
private,
in
to manage
can
public
set up
land.
if they followed their rules. You should have asked some questions last year before you did that. Because y'all were a joint sponsor on that. How do you think it got on the square? How do you think? It was Extension, Chamber, and the Downtown Association was all involved in that. So y'all had as big a part as the city in it. You should have asked some questions before you just changed everything. You didn't ask about the history. And that market goes back to 2002, 2003.
My name's Mark Cotney, and I had a couple of questions about mainly about the C1 neighborhood commercial zoning. First of all, I want to applaud y'all's efforts for what you're doing. Our community's had a pretty strong stance against alcohol consumption since the days of the honky tonks, and I think what you're doing is going to loosen up commerce in downtown and hopefully allow for some growth, and I think that's good. Obviously, we all want controlled growth, and everybody wants zoning until it affects them in some negative way. And I don't have any one specific issue today. Since I live in the county, I thought I would come today and just ask a few questions about the C1 neighborhood commercial. You seem to be trying to go towards a walking traffic area most everywhere, and I get that. I've been to Atlanta to some neighborhoods where a lot of it's walking traffic, but I'll tell you, my business in downtown, 99% of it is drive-in traffic, and 25% of that's from outside the county. So I would encourage you to be careful on how you limit some of these things as we're growing. My neighbor at the dry cleaner is the one that called me and got me interested in this, and I would encourage you to allow a dry cleaning plant right where it is, because that's, we all need that business. There's an alphabetical list of businesses here, and I did not see any listing for massage therapists. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. We have massage therapists in town. My business refers to them frequently, and so I think that's something that needs some control. Item LL4 in the mixed-use buildings. I had a question as to why you were excluding 3-bedroom properties and limiting it to 2-bedroom properties. And I'm just asking that question.
And what zoning district was that?
It's C1, neighborhood commercial. If you look through page 58, this was as of Monday. I don't know if this has been changed again since then. Page 58, line 4, minimum heated area, blah, 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 3-bedroom and larger dwellings shall be prohibited. I didn't know why. It didn't make sense to me. If you want people to live downtown, but you don't want large families to live downtown, I'm just asking the question. Item III, retail manufacturing. I went back and looked in the downtown district, and then in the outside the downtown district, the C1 neighborhood. You have it limited to 5 operators, and I'm not clear if that's people that are doing the manufacturing or employees of that business as a whole. And I can think of, medium-sized bakeries and cookie stores and candy stores where you've got, people can come in and watch it being made, and you've got a lot of people back there doing it. So I'm again asking, that is 5 really a good number there, or should you think about a few more? I know in my business, I have 5 employees. It's a service business, it's not a manufacturing business, but I did not know what your thought process was there. Lastly, under building standards, letter A, your maximum floor area, let's see here. It's ambiguous, and I would encourage council to not be ambiguous with legislation or zoning, because we just don't know who's going to be in your shoes, in your seat 10 years from now, or what kind of opportunities property owners are going to have 10 years from now. So something that ambiguous that said maximum floor area shall be consistent with the floor area of similar establishments in neighborhood commercial settings comparable to the scale of Thomaston. That could be anything, and I reading that makes me a little uneasy. So anyway, those are my questions, and I again appreciate what y'all are doing. Thank you.
And Mark, those were a lot of questions. We'll write them down. And
Yeah, I got them right.
We'll get with you.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Charles McNitchen, and I appreciate y'all allowing me to have a word this morning. I know you got an earful of me last Tuesday, and I'll try to be brief today. And I know y'all have a tremendous job ahead of you in what you're doing, and I know that all elected officials make the decision based on what the voice of the community brings to you. And I know your appointed people are set to the same standards. Now, I came up because I thought just the fact of you changing me from R1 to ES2 was going to raise my taxes. And y'all have assured me that it will not. And if that's the case, then I'm fine going to ES2. But when I was here Tuesday, we were looking at the facts that R1 was 3 houses on an acre of 1,000 square foot each. And the ES2 was 1 acre with a 1,400 square foot house And the ES2 was going to be a 2-acre tract with 1,800 square foot. I looked at it last night, and it has changed since we were here Tuesday. That the R1's changed, the ES2 is gone from 1 acre from 1,400 is now 1,800 square foot in ES1, and the ES2 was changed, and that it is now 2 acres with 2,200 square foot on your information sheets. So that's a huge change from us going to 3 houses of 1,000 square foot to 1 house on 2 acres with 2,200 square foot. That's a huge change. But I was okay with going to ES2. There's a lot of things in there that look great for our property area, and I figure taxes are going to go up anyhow, just the programs that y'all have got going. And the other thing that we talked about was Dr. Dodge's farm, and like everybody else, I rode by, and it is winter time, and the grass is dead, and they have spent $7,000 cleaning the fence out there so you can see their property and you can see the cow patties. But I think she's got some pictures floating around here that you look at, you'll see what the farm normally looks like. And another week or so, when the grass comes out that has been fertilized, is going to cover most of the cow patty stuff. Also, we hadn't thought about it, hadn't discussed about it when we was here Tuesday. Their property is in the Land Conservatory Plan Act, whatever it's called, for tax purposes. But in that regulation, it says that one of the main things that they will do is to help feed and help the habitat of wild animals, have open spaces for migratory birds. And certainly their house and property does that. And like I say, another week or two when spring comes along and it gets grassy out there, it is a beautiful farm. So thank y'all very much for what you do, and I appreciate you listening to me.
So Mr. McMitcham and we have talked with Bill, and I don't know where he is in the process of updating the proposed zoning, but as we talked, and my recollection was, so R1, E1, and E2 will just basically be lot size, and there will be equal symmetry between R1, E1, and E2 as far as square footage of living dwellings, and that has changed to 1,500 feet across, right? So what Mr. Johnson did originally was correlate the lot size to the minimum building standard, and it was progressive, meaning it got bigger as the lot size got bigger, but we have changed that back to 1,500. So R1, E1, E2, 1,500 square foot across the board as far as the dwelling.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
The lot size. Yeah, so the lot size is just based on the zoning classification. E2 being a 2 acre lot, E1 being a 1 acre lot, and R1 being, what was the lot size on R1?
R1 was originally 15,000.
15,000 square feet.
And
So-
the 1 and 2 acres based on the subdivision regulations, which call for 1 acre and 2 acres. So we just put that in the zoning so we can account for that.
Well,
So-
I want to make a point. I'm not in subdivision. I'm not in the subdivision across the lake, across over there. I'm not part of that subdivision, and neither are they. And neither is a house between us. We're not in the Hayes Arnold subdivision. So we are independent property on our own over there on Cocktown Road. And, but, I know the city's growing, and I know that it's great of all the things that I'm seeing happen, because Thomas had been a dead city here for a long time, and seniors were the ones that kept paying the taxes and paying everything and keeping it going until such time that some revenue is coming back in, and it's good to see revenue coming in, but we can't outspend the revenue coming in and put all the taxes back on or change the property to where if we decide that we want to sell it, then we're going to have to sell it to some real huge individual, square footage, And, or that we are, and you wouldn't be classified if you say, well, we're gonna grandfather you in, or Charlie Daniel down there, you're gonna grandfather him in. You don't put grandfather on there. You put
Non-conforming.
say it again?
Non-conforming.
Non-conforming on the lot. And if I'm a prospective buyer of a lot and I look at it, says it's a non-conforming lot, I'm thinking there's a huge legal something going on with that property, and I'm probably gonna step off to something else right away. So maybe just the wording too would be thought. But thank y'all so very much.
I have a question for clarification purposes. Will someone define the word fence for me as it regards to the zoning ordinance?
You know, I noticed that in the paper too, that not only were you removing animals, but you were gonna remove the fence. Does that mean that if the fact that Dr. Dodge and them are able to keep the cows, so they're gonna have to take down the fence?
I'm unfamiliar.
He quoted you in the paper that said there's also an ordinance that the fences are gonna be removed for animals on 8A.
I have no knowledge of that.
Okay.
But
Something about setbacks one time on the fences.
we had talked about setbacks, but there's, to my knowledge, no provision that would remove fencing.
Okay, but I'm quoting what was in the paper. That said, in addition to this, we're putting an ordinance in there that they're gonna remove the fence. And I'm wondering if that would be included now that you're requiring fences for dogs, if they're gonna have to go in there and take down the fence for dogs or fence for cows, because, you know.
No, sir.
Okay.
Just two things, or maybe three things. So my takeaway from the last meeting, or the last public hearing, there was general consensus to allow livestock in E1 and E2 zones, which would be cows, horses, chickens, goats, that would further be regulated by the animal ordinance, which is already in effect. The one that says, you gotta have 5 acres, and then you get so many per that. So E1 and E2, that would be a permitted use.
Thank you.
And it would be only allowable as a special use permit in R1.
Right.
Yeah, because, the law said, well, you can have a cow or 2 goats on 1 acre. There was no specification of what that acre was. If it's a lake, it's a swampland, you got good pasture land or rocks. And see, even cows, steers that are kept in a little square feeding plot are fed and they're in good condition. Nothing, I guess it would go back into animal control or whatever if the animal on that lot was not taken care of or not in good condition. So thank y'all so very much for your time and thank you for what you do.
Mayor, just.
I'm sorry, any questions for me?
No, and then this was just public comment because we have people watching and the radios here and we talk about growth and land use and taxes and the impact to taxes, right? Because everybody's worried about their property taxes. So the city operates anywhere between a $32 and a $34 million budget annually, and less than 1/4% is funded by property taxes for your O&M budget. So,
Amazing. And I was looking over all the, trying to read all the ordinances, and I didn't see anything where your ordinance on sanitation came forward. It was under your old stuff where you was quoting about cleaning up for the animals and stuff. I did not see anything addressing sanitation in your new ordinances.
So that is contained in the general ordinances, which are meant to be regulatory, that are tied to the general provision statute, which is like one of the first ones that ties it to an offense, right? Like it's against the law. So zoning ordinance is section 98 in the code, and that has to follow the state process because there's a whole state law on that. The regulatory ordinances fall outside of zoning. But I can get you the chapter that she read, but it's not going to be in your zoning ordinance. It's somewhere else in a different ordinance.
And I'm sorry, one last thing, you know, when you get older, you can't think of a lot of things at one time, you have to wait a little bit, and something else flies through your head. But I was reading in there, and of course, we pay $16.70 a month to have our trash picked up. And I thought I was paying that for the trash being picked up. In the ordinance, it says that $16.70 is a tax. So if most people know that we're paying an extra $16.70 tax a month, they may be able to take that off as a deduction later on, because it's not you paying a fee to have your garbage removed, you're paying a sanitation fee or as a tax. Just a thought.
Yeah, but that's probably an IRS question for the accountants.
Thank you very much.
And I contacted the garbage provider. I know that some of the people on the south side of Cobbtown Road had questions about sanitation pickup, and there being a problem with it only being picked up once a month. So hopefully we've got that rectified for you.
They come every week at my place.
Okay. I thought I heard somebody say that they were having problems, so I clarified with the garbage provider.
Thank you very much.
I'm Becky Dodge, and I live at 426 Cobbtown Road. Not quite as old as Charles, but I'm like he is. I know every one of you, and I'm just as nervous as I can be about speaking to you. I wanted to read something that I found. Progress of the best kind is comparatively slow. Great success cannot be achieved at once, and we must be satisfied to advance in life as we walk step by step. That sort of hit me as a good way to sort of approach some of these problems we're having. I know you all have worked on this for months, years. I think Doug said maybe 2 years. I've worked on projects myself that long, and I know how hard it is, and I know, you know, we want to get it done, we want to get it all done, but I do hope that in making decisions that you put a face with the changes you're making. If you don't know the people that live in that area, ask the other person that represents them and put a face on it, put faces on what is happening to those people or what could happen to them. I'll quote Mr. Thompson, what if somebody doesn't like you? What if somebody doesn't like your cows or trees you have in your yard? And they're the city manager, and they can have a part in things that happen to you. I hope you'll take all of that into consideration. We had no idea we were breaking sanitation code at all in our farm. We work hard, and Wayne has a job that's kept him away from being able to do things in the last couple of years. I did send some pictures of the other seasons of the year and what it looks like. And we hate the ants, we hate the poop as well as anybody, but you know, in thinking of how to dispose of it, I think walking behind the cow and picking up poop and putting it in the garbage can is not something you all want us to do. I appreciate you. I know I've worked in schools most of my life, and I know how it is to be criticized, and I am not criticizing. We are willing to do whatever it takes to make that a beautiful property. It's our own. And I just, as Doug said, you're not targeting, but it's hard to feel that way when you're the only piece of property like that in the community. I appreciate your time. I hope we can work as neighbors. I hope we can work as one community. I too am glad. We eat uptown most 2 or 3 times a week. We've enjoyed that. We own property in town that is not being taken care of. You can go down most any street in Thomaston and somebody's breaking a code. I don't know why I don't know what the process is going to be to take all this on. There's a lot of stuff. It's going to take a lot of people to do it. And it would be very nice if, we could start keeping the ones we have. I have a a lot behind my condo over there that I call Jurassic Park. It's just absolutely full of every kind of animal you can imagine. But I appreciate you. I know you. I'm glad to be a Thomasonian. I'm glad with the kind of people that represent us. Thank you.
Russell, maybe it'd be helpful at this point if we can kind of talk about, Wes brought up a good point, as did Ms. Dodgen, as far as some of the challenges that we're currently facing, putting zoning aside, which certainly needs to be addressed, and we certainly are taking off a big chunk, but we got to start somewhere, and I commend you and the city attorney for putting this a good step forward and getting this done. But, can we talk about what we've done this year or in the past, at the end of last year, this year, to kind of beef up and address some of the ordinance violations that we're seeing now, and kind of what our plan is going forward briefly?
And some of the reason for this new stuff
Right.
is to strengthen,
Because it all
having
does
some issues everywhere else. With
It does tie together, and I think it would be beneficial and to kind of just lay that out briefly.
So no one can deny that we have code enforcement issues, right? We have them, substandard living conditions, rotting properties, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that the council has done, they've appropriated additional staff. We've hired an additional code enforcement officer. We have another vacancy. We're trying to hire another additional code enforcement officer. And in addition, our building official, which is quasi-code, quasi-building, but they focus more on the building side of the building code for utility inspections and certificate of occupancies and issuing permits and that sort of thing. So we have appropriated funds to do more enforcement. In addition, we have started having town hall administrative type meetings with owners of properties so that they understand better what the city is looking for from a regulatory side, and those communications are going well, and we're actually working with them so that they have more transparency in what we're trying to do and they have a better understanding, and also to allow them to make modifications or suggested changes in our interpretation or any local variances to the building codes that we adopt. So we have done that. I think last year alone we wrote 180 citations for abandoned vehicles. We got people driving in the park. We got people living in encampments throughout town, and we've tried to orchestrate a plan to abate that. We've also hired an exclusive contract with the district attorney's office to come in and prosecute those cases in municipal court. When you talk about code enforcement, it's quasi-civil, quasi-criminal, meaning that a lot of times on a property maintenance violation, it does require some sort of cure period or an opportunity for the person that may be in violation to come into compliance before it's adjudicated in court. So we have to give notice. There has to be notice of a time to fix it. If it's not, then we have to go out and issue a citation. They have to go to court, and then there's a hearing, whatnot, and then we have a remedy. Then we have certain other properties where the city takes a position to file against the property, not necessarily the property owner, and the hopes is that we get an order through the court so that we can go in and abate the nuisance. So we've got a lot of moving parts on the enforcement standpoint. But to Ryan's point, that's a little bit of what we're doing to address some of your challenges. And that's a slow-moving wheel, but we have put the pieces in place to make it happen. When we talk about growth, we have a lot of people that have moved in from outside of Upson County or Thomaston that are looking for houses. I think on the MLS last month, maybe 30 or 40 houses for sale. That was it. People are contacting us about commercial space, retail space, a lot of development. Prior to last year, the city had no ordinances from a developmental standpoint on stormwater. As far as when we create impervious surface or new rooftops or new pavement, that does not get soaked into the ground. So where does that water go? it finds its way to the street, to our pipes, to our streams. So in anticipating the growth, we can guess that we're going to have growth or not. All the indicators are that we're probably going to see growth, right? What we're seeing on 19 North, what we're seeing in interest with downtown. So the only way that we can control that growth is through zoning or land use. So the way our current zoning ordinance is drafted, it is cumulative in nature or additive in nature, meaning that if you have an industrial piece of property or a light industrial piece of property or a commercial piece of property, that particular land use as drafted picks up every other land use in the zoning ordinance. So if you own an industrial piece of property, you can put residential there, you can put commercial there, you can put industrial there. Well, if we know that we're on the precipice of gaining growth, do we want wide open zoning to where you can basically put whatever you want in that particular zone? We were having situations where people were coming before the council making requests for property rezones or special condition zoning to allow a particular use. And as you do that over time, you establish zoning to create land use. So you kind of want your residential to be together, and then you want a buffer between residential and full-on commercial. That's where the C1 zoning comes through, and it does have a walkability factor to it, but it's also meant to be more of a transitional zone between a residential structure and straight out commercial. So you have some softer use, this kind of mixed use. You can have some commercial, professional, office type stuff, but it's not your Walmarts or your Home Depots or your appliance stores. So as we were receiving these requests at the council for conditional zoning or rezoning of properties, you got to think that you've got a map that was drafted back in 1965 where they laid out what they kind of wanted Thomaston to look like. And over time, as we have received requests for zoning changes or conditional zones, you kind of get a hodgepodge of mixed uses within that particular zoning designation, which over time inadvertently undoes your land use. You have no control over it because now you've created conditional or special zoning allowances. And then if I rezone JD's property right next to me and we give them what is want, the contiguous property comes over and says, well, you just rezoned them commercial. I want to be commercial too, so why did you rezone them and you're not going to rezone me? And then it's a domino effect. Now Ryan sees that land use and he wants to come in and provide that same type of use. So over time, you chip away at the intended land use, and this rezoning was meant to be a restructure in anticipation for growth that we think we're going to have. Now, we did realize that that was going to impact current residents and current businesses, but it only impacts you to the point of the property owner who would buy it after you, meaning everything that is in its existence commercially would be not grandfathered, right? Because we had that question. So a little bit about grandfathering. Grandfathering is not a legal term. That's a term that's politicized and we throw it around, but it has no legal meaning. The actual legal term is a legal non-conforming use. It basically has the same meaning other than it's an actual legal definition. So if you own a dry cleaner business, and we heard from Charlie, and we changed the zoning, and dry cleaning plants is now precluded in the new zoning ordinance, which we didn't do. We've already made that modification. I think we've got that all worked out. That wouldn't mean that that particular business could not continue to operate. Absolutely they could. They're a legal non-conforming use. And even if they sold that property, the person that bought it could continue that legal non-conforming use. All it means is once that property is sold, if I'm selling you this iPhone and it's a non-conforming use, You can buy it and you can still use it. You just can't make it bigger and bigger. But yes, sir.
What happens, say, it burned down, Charlie Nimitz sold it, new owner owns it, it burned, then can you build back on that site, or?
My understanding is that when there's a catastrophic loss, then yes, you can. You just can't expand it. So that's a little bit about the grandfathering provision, but all that to say, this land use directive in the new zoning ordinance was meant to be put in place to control growth so that we can preserve land use as we continue to grow, and we do it smart. That's why we want to have public hearings. We want to understand what the general public would like that to see. We have all type of uses in Thomaston. Some people like cows. Some people like bakery. Some people like heavy industry. Some people like green space and recreation. Well, how do we decide where we're going to have those things and everybody in the community be in agreement? That's what zoning does. That's what land use does. Some other proactive measures that the city has taken is maybe 3-4 years ago, Ryan came to me and he says, "Hey, we need to really get on downtown Thomaston, and we need to revitalize our Main Street program." You know, I think when that conversation came, we had no Main Street program. We had a downtown development authority that hadn't met in probably 5 years. We had a historic preservation commission that met sometimes they didn't. We've reinvigorated all of those boards, and as part of that, we have created, inducements to revitalize downtown, and some of those inducements include discounted permitting, discounted occupational tax, discounted alcohol licensure. We've created an entertainment district to come into to come into more conducive use of 2022 metrics. People might want to come downtown and have a glass of wine and go shop. We've made that allowable. We've made it easier for people to obtain certain licenses, such as alcohol licenses. In response to that, we applied to the state of Georgia for a special taxing zone, which you've probably heard called the rural zone designation. So now anybody who wants to buy property within that zone, they can get tax credits, 20% of the purchase price, 20% of the rehab price. All they got to do is create jobs, and they get to take that as a tax credit. So we've tried to partner with the state, and also by providing funding on the local level to prop up these designations, Main Street, DDA, Historic District, to create an environment that can regulate but also incentivize and try to attract development to come to that core to make it better. We get back to zoning and land use, one of the questions I think Mark had about square footage requirements for living in C1 or downtown. Well, under the current zoning, you can live in a commercial structure in downtown. All you have to have is 300 square feet. So when we look at zoning and we look at anticipated growth coming to our community, do we want our entire downtown corridor to be just houses? That's probably not what we want. 300 feet is probably too small. So what we said is we can have mixed use, and you can live in loft apartments in downtown, but we're going to increase the square footage because 300 is probably too small, and you got to be on the second floor. We want the downtown, the below grade floor, first floor in our downtown. We want to reserve that for commercial enterprise, so we can have bakeries and dentists and retail stores, but you can live. So we've created all of these ordinances not in a measure to over-regulate what we have going on right now. There are some uses that probably shouldn't be there, but those are legal non-conforming uses. Those don't change. But what we are trying to prepare for was when people make purchases or they move to Thomaston and they want to create a use, that we have the regulations in place before that happens, so that we don't retroactively have to fix it once it becomes a problem. Now, how we get there and what those regulations look like on the front end is why we're talking to you all and inviting you to talk to your neighbors, to talk to your business partners, to come in to make sure we get it right. How do we preserve commerce? How do we preserve green space? How do we preserve agriculture? Do we want agriculture? Do we want green space? Do we want heavy industry? You know, there's certain things that we're actually saturated in that from a growth standpoint, we probably don't need any more of. If there's a market for selling blue pens, and it's a great market, do we want everybody in Thomaston to do nothing but sell blue pens? Probably not, because then we're not diversified and you want other types of services. So we did a market analysis, and we went out as part of our rural zone designation. We did a leakage study. We brought in consultants. They did market analysis that actually looks at what people in Thomaston are buying, what we're really good at, what we're selling too much of, and what we're not selling enough of. And we try to build our zoning to mitigate some of the things that we have too much of, but to also entice some of the things that we don't have enough of. So all that kind of rolls into this zoning process, but the zoning process is just one piece. We have building regulations, developmental standards, tax programs, different city functions and committees that are all trying to work together to create residential units, commercial units, industrial units, providing tax credits, providing inducements, so that we can grow to a common vision. What we need help from the general public in is helping the elected officials define what that vision is. What do we want to be? And when they get that feedback, they have to construe that and memorialize that in some sort of legal document, whether it be an ordinance or whether it be zoning regulation, so that we can control and so that we can foster the things that need controlling and the things that need to be fostered. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Can I ask one? While you're doing all that, will you address one more thing of the city limit sign on County Road? The city limit sign is right there at Beaver Run Trace and the dam to the lake. And when they cut the right of way, they stop at that sign. When the city picks up trash, they stop at that sign. Reality, city comes on up halfway around the curve. You can't go all the way to Cobbtown because I own that last square acre up there, and it's in the county. But your city limit sign should be moved on up just about all the way around the curve coming towards Cobbtown. And if you look, there's an old roadway that cuts across from County Road over to Cobbtown, and that's where the city comes across behind my building there on the corner. So if you had a city limit sign that moved on up to there, then the people picking up trash and everything else, and everybody working on it. We had a pole that had a problem out there, and they were trying to decide, well, that's the county. I said, no, it's in the city, so we had to go through all of that. I had to call 911, and they said, well, you're in the county. No, I'm in the city. They had a fire, and they tried to call the fire department, and it wouldn't want to come. But my point is, I think if you could move that city limit sign from down there in front of the dam on up to where the city line actually comes across from County Road over to Cobbtown, and maybe even think of putting a city limit sign on Cobbtown to let everybody know about all the way out Cobbtown on the south side is the city. Of course, property owners own to the center line of Cobbtown and also to the county road over there on our deeds. But on the other side is the county. And so if that city limits signs were more understandable, then we may get the people picking up the trash, cutting the right of way and everything else out there a little bit more. Thank you.
I have a question too. Is anything being done jointly with the county to bring up their requirements for things? I don't know that I don't know anything about the county ordinances or anything like that. There are only 3 houses on Cobtown Road that are in the city. Everything across the street, and for every nice house across the street, there's an abandoned house. There's cars, there's trees down, there's everything, all along that road. And is anything jointly being done to include the county in any of the, bringing Thomaston to where we want to be?
First of all, that was a gracious comment. I don't think there's one nice house for every not nice house. It's probably just a bunch of nice houses.
They're
but-
nice houses, and they're having to live with it. I mean, they're abandoned and everything else,
But
but they are nice houses. They're nice people.
I do know that the county government has tried to ramp up their code enforcement effort like the city. I know that they have hired, code enforcement personnel, but they have not, to my knowledge, I don't think they have adopted the same property maintenance standards that the city has. So that would be a question for the county. There's no consolidated approach for unincorporated versus.
Those areas where one side's county, one side's city, it's a nightmare. I mean, because Wayne has not been able to vote for the people that are now telling him, what. So I just wondered if there was any joint.
There's currently not anything joint. There's supposed to be symmetry in abutting land uses, and we try to do a pretty good job of that. There's a whole separate process for that. The other question we had is, no city limit sign is going to be exactly where the city limits, unless you get a surveyor out there and shoot a pin. Normally, it's meant to be in the general proximity. Hey, you're entering the proximity or the geography of the city. But if we have a service provision problem and it's in the city, we can definitely address that. That's not really dictated by the signs. The other thing on the right-of-way, poles on the right side of the road, those are Georgia Power poles. Cities on the poles on the left side, those are city poles. Yes, sir.
Her comment just then, that Wayne had not been able to vote in elections.
Right.
He lives in the city limits, by what y'all said, then why is he not allowed to vote in the city election?
So all of the city elections are handled by the county. So if there are any city election questions, and I know we had a couple, they're sporadic, those can be handled through the county office that handles the voting. We have some properties, for whatever reason, part of the parcel might be in the county, part of the parcel might be in the city, but the actual physical residence is in the city, but they have them as a county voter, so that they can't vote in the city.
What about the fire?
Fire city, right? So 911 is a joint project, but the 911 dispatch, so everything when you call 911 is dispatched through 911. That is a county operation. So if you're not being dispatched to the appropriate address, then you can contact the sheriff's office and they can get that fixed. Or if you know it's a particular problem, I can talk to them about that for you.
Don't mind calling.
Yeah.
No, that was good. Thank you for doing it, because zoning does tie a lot of this, what we're trying to do together. I mean, it's all, like a puzzle that's trying to be put together in order to move forward. And like I said, I think we've taken on a big piece, and this is the start of good things to come.
So in a lot of the thought and the comment that I get when I talk to citizens, and I've had a few reached out to me, the initial reaction is, well, the government's trying to over-regulate and they're trying to create something new. That's not necessarily the case. A lot of the rezoning in the new ordinances are meant to protect against future growth.
And I think most of the people here are your law-abiding people.
Yeah.
We want to do the right thing. We want to do what's required of us. We won't, but we're trying to obey the law, obey the ordinances. We're those people.
Did you say to protect against future growth?
Or when future growth comes, that it's the way we want it. right?
Who
Maybe
decides for we?
the citizens, the council. You know, what do we want to be as Thomaston? Do we want all 19 to be strip mall? Do we want it to be more out parcels with more green space? Do we want overlays? You know, do we want more parks? Do we want more industry? How much land do we set aside for each particular use? How do we transition between residential and industrial? You know, if there's an annexation, say somebody buys the land on the north side of Cobbtown Road, and they want to incorporate that into the city, and they want to zone it heavy industrial, and they want to put a battery manufacturing plant there. Zoning controls that, right? So they're going to request a zoning designation. That's an extreme situation because that would be an annexation. But you could have the same thing where we have properties now that are zoned heavy industrial where there's residential houses that exist in the city now. Somebody could buy that land and they could put an industry on that property right next to a residential property. Well, do we necessarily want that, or do we want to try to create more conducive land use to what we anticipate in terms of growth and what the citizens want?
But one of the biggest problems we have on Cobbtown that I have is I go on my back deck to look at the lake. I hear this lake plant running down there just really loud, and it's a long way away.
That's Plant Addison that you're
Whatever it
probably
is, it's
hearing.
loud.
And that's zoned industrial.
They need a muffler.
Yeah, that's a gas cycle power plant.
Georgia Power.
Yeah. Not to say that we're lawyers, but it's like the old lawyer adage that new lawyers know the law and old lawyers know the exceptions. Well, we have to understand what the laws are and what the exceptions are. That's when we're working with you guys. That's when we want to have public hearings. We need to hear what's going on out there before we make any decisions, changes, or whatnot. That's when we have to be very careful about what we do and when we do it.
Thank you, Don. Did you get your question answered a while ago about what's a fence?
Yes, I just wanted to understand what the definition of a fence was in regard to, like I said, having a property line fence, having a fence for your swimming pool, having a fence for your dogs, having a fence for a cemetery. What was the exact definition of a fence?
Did we? I don't remember even talking about fences.
Hasn't come up.
Yeah, there's no preclusion or regulation of fences. The only time you get into issues with fences has to be their proximity to right-of-ways and the height of fences,
Exactly.
right? So anything, I think, what is it, 7 feet? Is
4 in the front yard max for residential.
yeah. So we do govern the height of what fences are, but not whether you can have a fence or not.
Or where they need to be.
Well, they can't be on the right-of-way,
Right,
right?
but outside of that.
They have to be on your property, but outside of that, there's no recommendation to change anything.
In the home use, you have it where you cannot have a chain link fence across the front of your property.
That may be true.
We'll have to look at that, because I know we do have those. Yes, sir.
One of y'all mentioned setbacks on fences. Can you address that?
Well, that was pitched as an idea when we were talking about agriculture. Meaning if you own 200 acres and your neighbor owns 3, and your property's a butt, and let's say you have cattle or you have horses, and you have internal fences that keep those cattle or those horses 100 yards from your resident. But because of the setbacks, your neighbor's house is built 15 feet from the property line. Well, if you run a fence right on the property line, your horses or cows are 15 feet from your neighbor, but they're 100 yards from your house. So it was pitched as a plausible solution, not as a recommendation. Would you set some sort of setback in there to protect occupied structures from that type of land use?
Check state law, because I believe it's the same way in Georgia. I know Alabama would. if a fence is not on the property line, nothing is contested for 7 years, the neighbor can claim that land. So essentially, you may be allowing a neighbor, if you set a setback, say 15 foot from the property line, the other neighbor may be able to claim that land after 7 years.
There's some recent case law on that where they're getting away from squatters' rights. So I know there is some recent case law on that.
Anybody else have any more comments? Well, we have pushed this back. I don't know how many times we pushed this back. Recently, we pushed it back another month. But it is to get some more feedback. I mean, that's what we, and I like when people come talk and tell us stuff, because I do it now, not after we get something changed and then you say, well, you didn't know about it. You know, it's like that. And then it becomes a problem to change stuff where you can do a lot easier now than later. So we really do appreciate hearing, even whether we agree with it or not, we do appreciate people coming and speaking, because if you don't know about it, there's nothing you can do about it. So
We pushed the anticipated adoption date back to April 5th, and we're going to have another public hearing on March the 22nd. And at that point, we should have a final proposed draft.
March 22nd.
Yes.
and as soon as we've been updating anything significant, we've been updating that on the website, right?
Correct. Yes.
And again, I think it's probably pertinent to make sure that anything that's on the website right now is just proposed, that's not an approved zoning, and that's just, again, to merely provide transparency, as the mayor said, that when something major has happened, but it's not gospel at that point, it's merely proposed, hence it's changing based on public comment and things that we've, encountered, and we're not always gonna get it right. And we're, and that's why if we didn't care, if it was merely a dictatorship, we'd just do it and not have any public comment, which I think is not, obviously, not what we're about. And there's been a lot of changes, but some of you in the audience who suggested things, they've been changed. And, we've got to start somewhere. And, Wes, to your point about the farmer's market, I think it's something we need to go back and look at. And if it's not right and we need to do something different, I mean, let's talk about it. But it certainly wasn't at any time or of that, certainly wasn't in a malicious way, or just to try to do this for one group and this for another. It was just, we've got to make a decision, and it's not to say that it's right, but you got to make a decision. The worst thing you can do is just sit there and not do anything. So,
And I think, on that, once we get the farmer's market thing that we're thinking about
Right.
building, it can be easily addressed then.
yeah, so we don't always get it right. And I'm the first one to tell you, I don't. I learn every time we have a meeting from people in the crowd. Mr. Mitchum's taught me a lot. I just got to convince him that just because the zoning changed doesn't mean his taxes are going up. But hopefully,
I should check for my taxes right now, and you'll like the difference when they come out.
no, I'm picking at him. But
We appreciate y'all sitting down and listening.
absolutely. I hope we at least can be known for that. Like JD said, I may not always agree with you, but I'll give you as much time as you want. With
Me and JD talked a lot
Yeah.
the last couple.
And we'll get with you on this other stuff outside to kind of,
Whether
where
it's-
we can,
We're living in a world right now where everything seems to be going crazy.
And I think-
everything. And I think people, anytime we start things like this, everybody's scared. I'm worried about this. I worry about it every day. So I think part of it is just knowing you all are willing to talk, knowing, that I feel better about it. I do. I'm still worried, but I'm
it does come to a
better.
trust issue. We're asking you to please trust us.
And please trust us.
And we have to trust y'all too, but it's in the world where that's not the case. You don't trust hardly anybody, and you
It's-
probably shouldn't trust anybody, really, a lot of times.
With any type of G in front of the permit. You know, again, for those who live in my district, I mean, they come to my office, and that's fine.
That's
And they've been very respectful of my time, and I don't even tell them to call. I said, come on, if I got time, I'll meet with you. If not, we'll figure out a time that does satisfy both of us. So it's got to, I mean, it's just part of it. So we can't do our jobs effectively without hearing input from you, and
It's a strange time.
yeah.
It's a strange world
So
right now.
I'll belabor that enough, so I'll shut up.
Does anybody else have anything, we need to do anything else before we adjourn? If there's nothing else, I have a motion to adjourn out of the public meeting.
So move.
Second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Again, we thank y'all for coming. Really
Thank
good.
y'all very much.
Thank you.
Oh, let me grab them.
I don't know, you can quote the Alabama law, you gotta be from there to quote it, all right? So I'm gonna start quoting. Come see you. You too, see y'all.
I do.